Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Texas Commission on the Arts free professional development webinar. Thank you for joining us today for a session we are very proud to offer, Building a Fundraising Board and Fundraising Basics, featuring Cookie Ruiz, Executive Director of Ballet Austin and Vice President of the Board of Directors for Texans for the Arts. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone is able to participate. So if you could, please send us a hello using the questions box. You'll find it on the GoToWebinar toolbar, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. Oh, great, some are coming in. If you don't see the box, you may need to expand the questions tool by clicking on the plus sign next to the word questions. Oh, wonderful, look, we've got so many folks here and chiming in. Great to see all of you all. All right, I'm Derek Mudd, and I'm a program administrator here at TCA. In this series, TCA staff has chosen topics and speakers to provide strategies and effective practices in arts administration that we believe will be helpful for arts organizations and/or they've been requested by our constituents. We are always looking for topics that will be of interest and service to you. So if you have suggestions about topics and speakers for future webinars, please email those to me at derek@arts.texas.gov. Today's webinar topic was recommended by several of you last year, and a large number of registrants reflects that this topic is of great interest to the field. All of our previous webinars, professional development webinars, I should say, are available on Vimeo.com. Here's a list of some of the past professional development webinars. This is just an example list, so there's several more up there than you see listed here. So if any of those topics are of interest to you, remember that they are available for viewing at any time at Vimeo.com/TXARTSPD. You can also find a link to them on our website, www.arts.texas.gov. If you go to the Initiatives tab and run your mouse over that, you'll see a link to the Professional Development Webinar Series on Vimeo. A copy of this webinar will be available on Vimeo next week. And a PDF of the slide presentation will be emailed to you following the presentation. During today's webinar, you are welcome to send in questions using the text box that you used to say hello earlier. We will save these questions until after our guest presentation. So if you have a question at any time, go ahead and send it in while it is still fresh in your mind. You'll also have additional time to submit questions at the end as well. I am very excited about our program today. This webinar filled up in mere hours after we announced it. It's a trend that we have seen at TCA since 2004 when we invited Cookie Ruiz to talk about fundraising. Her sessions are always in high demand. Cookie Gregory Ruiz has more than 25 years of experience in the areas of strategic planning, organizational development, and nonprofit fundraising management. Since 2002, she has held the professional designation of Certified Fundraising Executive by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Her community honors include Austin Business Journal's Profiles in Power Award, Austin Community Foundation's Beverly S. Sheffield Award for Excellence as a Nonprofit Executive, the American Red Cross's Clara Barton Medal of Honor, Volunteer of the Year for the Austin Independent School District, the Lone Star Girl Scout Council's Woman of Distinction Award, and the Junior League of Austin's Volunteer Extraordinaire Award. Cookie has served as the citywide chair of Create Austin. She has also served as a City Council appointee to Imagine Austin's Citizens Advisory Task Force and was a former president and board member of Con Mi Madre and is a graduate of the Austin City Works Academy. As a graduate of Leadership Austin, she served 4 years on its board of directors. Cookie is currently a member of the Board of Trustees and former national chair of Dance USA, the board of directors of the Performing Arts Alliance, vice president of the board of directors for Texans for the Arts, the Board of Directors of the Mayor's Better Austin Foundation, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Board of Directors of Housing Works Austin, a community advisor to the Young Women's Alliance, and she is also a fellow of the National Arts Strategies International Chief Executive Program. I had the opportunity to attend the Dance USA conference that was here in Austin last week, where Cookie was given a special honor at the end of the opening plenary. The mayor of Austin, during his opening remarks, called Cookie the best nonprofit fundraiser in Austin. Cookie serves as a speaker, facilitator, and presenter for a variety of leadership conferences, including the National Conference on Community Leadership, the National Performing Arts Conference, Americans for the Arts Annual Convention, National Conference of the Dance USA, the Governor's Women's Business Leadership Forum, and the Texas Commission on the Arts. At our most recent conference in 2015, the room reached capacity, so many who wanted to attend this session couldn't. We are pleased to be able to offer this webinar with Cookie, especially if you have missed it in the past. I'm going to hand it over to you now, Cookie. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this.
Well, I look forward to it. We're just waiting for our prompt to come up, and we'll change screens here. Here we go. All right. So I think we're good now. So thank you so much. That is the longest introduction in the world, and I think that what you all know about me is that I have never succeeded in telling anyone no. So maybe I need advice from you all on that. But I am really happy to have an opportunity to spend some time with you today on this topic of building a fundraising board. And I want to start us out by asking that we think about a nonprofit much as we think about the development of a human being. Many of you may be parents, and so this might be really information that you can relate to. All of us have been a human. We've watched our own development. And what happens in terms of nonprofits is that someone wakes up one day and they decide they have an idea. And that idea is something that they believe can make the world a better place. And I like to think, largely having spent a lot of time consulting to both social service and arts nonprofits, that's why we all exist. That is what we get up every day to do, is to make the world a better place. And so in the infancy of a nonprofit, there is this idea, there's this small group now, because when you become a nonprofit, there has to be a board. So there's a small board, and that small board acting on this idea is acting as staff. So in the very beginning, the board's role is to function in the role of getting everything done and getting the whole idea started. And then comes that toddler period where that board's been working together, they've been working hard, they've been pushing the ideas forward, and then eventually it's time for there to be a single staff member. So that happens kind of in that toddler period. And then I think of, in terms of preteen, at some point, this group of people is pretty tired. And so it's time to add their friends. And so they open the circle a little bit, but the board are still doers. And this is a really, although we're going to talk in the next bit about moving beyond this phase, what I want to do is to take a moment and stress the importance of this phase, because every nonprofit goes through each of these steps, and they're each one a part of the history, the tradition, the culture, and the importance of that organization. And none of these steps work well if any of them are bypassed. And so I enter the conversation with my own experiences, because I wish that I could see your faces, and my guess is that this is really in a perfect situation. We're in a room together and we're really sharing ideas. So what I'd like to do today is, with all due humility, to just share some ideas with you that I've collected working in this space, working in the nonprofit space throughout my entire career. So I came to Ballet Austin 20 years ago today. Today is actually my anniversary day. And it was a great organization. I hope it still is. It was a much smaller organization. It was struggling. And I would have considered it a prepubescent teenager, kind of pimply, and its voice kind of went up and down at odd moments. It was sometimes great and sometimes not so great. But it was 40 years old. So the point that I want to make to you is that there is not a correlation between the age of the organization and that organization's development. Because life happens, things happen, economies go up and down, boards are comprised of people and they have different challenges. And so an organization can really get stuck or stalled in terms of that development. And that was what had happened to Valley Austin. They had a very large board at that time. They have a very large board today. So as a development director, when I went around to the board there was a line item that said that there were 70 of them and that they would all make a gift of X amount. And when I would go around to ask for them to make that gift, they would say, oh, that's not me. So-and-so makes the gift. I give my time. So I spent quite a long time trying to go and figure out kind of what to do with this dilemma. So finally we had a meeting and I said, we have a problem because I end up having a stack of bills here. We as an organization have a stack of bills, and no matter how hard I try, I haven't quite figured out how to apply your time to the mortgage, or at that time, the rent, to the fax machine, the copying bill, or any other bill that we had, the electric bill or whatever. So it is this process of being unstuck that I want to share with you. Now, I'm often told that it's not rocket science. So facetiously, I'm going to share a little bit of rocket science with you. I could have called it that, or I could have called this Deep Thoughts by Cookie Ruiz. So I'm saying a little bit of rocket science. And the first piece of this is that in order to make this process of getting unstuck, because at some point for the organization to continue to grow, most of the time, I think we do a pretty good job. Most of the time, this idea that we have is a good idea, and what it needs is more resources. It needs more money. And so the reality happens that it just isn't going to get any better until there are more individuals raising money, and that initiative is led by the board. Having worked with so many different organizations, both on the social service side and on the small arts organization, nonprofit side, which is really the joy of my volunteer work. I really love doing that. There is this sense sometimes when I come in that, well, yeah, no, just in any city, no, the certain organizations, they're the ones that have this great board. We don't have that. That's just whatever the arts institution is in your city or your town, they're the ones that have that. And I'm suggesting that it is not an issue of entitlement, but it is actually truly a result of hard work in terms of making this challenge and this very challenging transition. And I think that what happens also is that we have these boards. Maybe these boards are giving at some level, because I do find that kind of spotty throughout the state, that some have gotten to the fact that the board's giving, but they're not giving sufficiently. So I think that one of the things that can happen to us is that we can forget sometimes as professionals, because the year in, year out need for contributed dollars never stops. And so once you have a donor, it is really easy to sometimes forget that giving is a choice. But I do know that our donors realize this. They know that each and every year they get to elect whether or not they make that gift. And yet sometimes with our organizations, and I've seen it so many times, where you've got a group of donors and they give every year, and the tendency is to hop over them and to cease to realize that they are in fact acting on their choice. The first and most important donors that we have, and this will stay that way forever, is this group of folks are our board members. And I mention this to say that it is very easy because we have this wonderful situation, depending upon where your organization is in that human development that I discussed earlier, it's really easy to just see them as an extended part of our staff or extended part of our family. And I think it is vitally important. We, many years ago here, made a concerted effort to flip the equation on how we thought about board members, how we spoke about board members, how we treated our board members, and that the the most preferred relationship that we have, the most desired relationship, is our board members. Because it is easy to forget, but as soon as we get up out of that bed one day and we have that great idea of how we're going to make life a better place, as soon as we make ourselves into a nonprofit, we don't own that anymore. That board, the board holds a fiduciary obligation. If our brilliant idea falls apart, the Secretary of State and all of the financial responsibilities come back on those board members. They hold fiduciary obligation, and I think that is that's something that makes them very special. They give us their time, they give us their resources, and they're willing to stand for us and stand up for us. So the opportunity and the importance of treating our board members and treating them well is something to remember. I like to pause at this moment also to talk about language becomes very important in fundraising. And one word that I hear used a lot across our state is someone will say, what does your board pay as dues? Our board pays, we have dues and we pay this much. And I would like to suggest that we're not country clubs and we're not memberships to fitness clubs. They're not dues. It's a gift. And even though they're our board member, it's a gift. And even though they are our board members, they still retain that choice. So I just think the word dues sometimes allows us to fall into pretty bad behavior, and that we ourselves had to drop that word years ago, and we are reminding ourselves always that each year our board members give gifts. Words become important, and that's just one that I like to have folks think about. So we are now each arriving in this situation. You may be new to your organization. You may have long tenure with your organization. But we arrive at a place. I arrived 20 years ago at a 40-year-old Ballet Austin. There were 70 board members sitting there. Some of them gave and some of them didn't. But I didn't just get to say, okay, well, half of the people in the room, well, half of you all just go home so I can work with these people over here who pay, who give. I had to work with the entire group. So the purpose of the conversation today is that these are some strategies that I've experienced and I've learned and I've picked up along the way of what do you do when you don't get to start out in a pristine way, wipe the slate clean, and just put all the people around the table that are just very highly involved in philanthropy and have it all right. We deal with the board that we have inherited, and they are great and wonderful people for many reasons. But this is about redefining that board's role, and it is, in fact, a process. So where does the process start? For me, it starts with the thing that was so confounding to me. As development director, which is the role in which I came to Ballet Austin, I would go in to meet with my boss about once a week, and I would ask him, could you share with me, well, I asked him the first time. The answer became the same after that. Could you share with me the organization's strategic plan? He said, quit making excuses. You need to go back to fundraising, get the money raised. We have a financial plan. Stop making excuses. So I would wait a few more weeks and I'd go in and say, I really, as a fundraiser, I have to have a strategic plan. I don't really know where I'm going without that. And that was a conversation that we never really could get past because you honestly didn't know what I needed. And at the end of the day, whether you're a development director on this call or an ED on this call, it absolutely, this transition that I'm sharing with you today, it begins with a plan. Plans don't have to involve very expensive consultants. In fact, we do plans with people all the time, and it's very down and dirty. And it's almost more of having a not to-do list, because most of us are doing so many things. It's less about the what to do, and it's a lot about setting some things on the not to-do list. The net result being the focusing of our energy and our resources so that we are doing a very few things to the exclusion of all else and doing it well. But that roadmap, that strategic planning process of road mapping is the story. Because what happens in the strategic planning process, And hopefully for arts organizations, it's an arts-led conversation. It's about the artistic vision. I'm not an artist, and my great joy in my career is that my colleague Stephen Mills, who's our artistic director, continues to stretch the vision of where we're going as we reach each of our destinations. We have these great conversations around artistic vision, and then my joy is picking up our business and aligning it 5 degrees to the east or west, or my ideas then become, how do I align the functioning of the business with that vision? I think it's a very difficult thing in art when art is creating, when the business gets ahead of the art and art is not creating the vision. Those are not the best situations to be in. So let's say that there is an arts conversation, arts-focused conversation of where your organization is going, what it wants to achieve, be it in teaching residencies or performance, or those of you that are involved in social justice, or those of you that may involved in treatment through art, however it is you are engaged and involved, this vision gets put in place, this roadmap gets put in place. And what happens with that is important, because the vision is to be aspirational. It is to be just beyond our outreach fingertips, the length of our arm, just beyond that. It allows, vision allows us to point towards the North Star and know whether or not we're aligned or just wandering all over the place. So let's say, just for the purposes of discussion, that we decide that our vision is that we're going to go, metaphorically, to Alaska. If we're going to go from Austin, Texas to Alaska, we can look up and we can find out what plane tickets cost. We can look up and decide what the temperatures will be when we get there, what kind of clothing would we be wearing, what we need when we get there. So we can identify clearly where we are today, what those resources are necessary to get to Alaska, and the delta between them. So the delta between those two things becomes, obviously, the strategic plan for the next 3 years or whatever. So in that conversation, and we did have that conversation, I changed, my boss made a departure, and I was asked to step into that role, and we built a plan. And we built a plan that did have quite a reach to get that we were headed in, and we were able to make that clear delineation of what will be the financial resources that we don't have today, who are the people that we don't have today, what's the talent that we don't have today that we need in order to get to, in this case, Alaska. Well, what happened in that conversation is what I want to share with you, because what happened in that conversation, someone said, well, I like Phoenix. Well, I appreciate that you like Phoenix. We're going to Alaska. And this whole conversation of the people that want to go to Phoenix because they want to sit in the sun and they don't want to head where we're headed, that's the most important moment of all. Because this is the moment where either the one person in the room that doesn't want to go to Alaska stops everyone from going to Alaska, which I've seen happen again and again, either by spoken word or through their silence. But the metaphor then becomes, if anyone's ever been as a child in a little red wagon going down a hill with two of your buddies, and all of a sudden you realize you should be going faster, but you turn around and you see that the last guy in the wagon's got their foot dragging to slow the wagon down. That is exactly the impact of what happens in a strategic planning process when the group does not move forward. And so the silent voices in the room or the loud voices in the room that are in the minority in terms of size of people and the numbers of people who have voted, I've seen really wonderful strategic plans completely adopted, and then silently or in other ways, someone saying, but I don't want to do that, and then everyone says, well, oh goodness, I guess we're not going after all. It is that moment. So once the group decides, yes, we're going to Alaska, it's fine. It's absolutely fine for someone that's been around a long time and has served the organization in a different way to say, I don't want to do that. Now, what happens next is really important, because it is, I tell the story that I have a board member who's a wonderful, magical person, but she's always rides her horse before she comes to meetings and is always late. So in one meeting we were having years ago, she said, you know what we need is a green pasture. And we all kind of looked at her and rolled our eyes thinking she was off topic and still at the barn. But she actually wasn't. And this whole idea around finding a place, much as the horse eventually would like to be in that green pasture with the clover and the white fence and no one on their back, what would happen if we have places within our organizations where there's more than one way to serve? You don't have to be on the board. It's the board or nothing. And we don't want to lose. My art form in terms of ballet is to have someone who cares about this art form and is willing to help us share that and keep it alive. Why in the world would I want to, quote unquote, kick someone off that loves us? I don't. But I also don't want them to slow the wagon down. So ultimately realizing, as many of you may have as well, that the committee structure is a wonderful place to be led by former board members or to be engaged with former board members, and that some of you have ways for having different sort of ex officio board members, different categories of board membership. But for us, we began to develop task forces, and task forces rather than just standing committees, and we're very focused on the things that we wanted to achieve. And task forces can pop up to support the strategic plan, and they can then be pulled down or they can go away altogether. So whether it's committees or task forces, understanding that some of the board members that may not want to have to face the financial obligation of the group that's going to Alaska, and they want to serve, but they don't want to serve in that way, then the question is, we don't want to lose you. How best, let's talk about how we're going to keep you involved. Because there's not just one way to be involved, but this group is actually going to be involved in fundraising, is going to be involved in giving, and this group is actually going to be involved in getting us to Alaska. So negotiating that conversation is important. What we found, and some of you may have found, is that this green pasture with its metaphoric white fence around it had more than one gate. So one gate came from board members that said, well, yeah, I do want to stay involved, and I do want to stay involved in this particular committee. And you mean you're not going to kick me off? You don't have to cut me up. You won't be involved in the board part of it? Then no, we vitally need you working in that role. But we also found a gate that came in from our community. In some cases, younger Austinites, in some cases, a variety of Austinites that kind of didn't know us well enough yet. They had very specific skills that we needed, and they wanted to know some of these former board members. So it became this place of meeting one another. So we found that some board members wanted to step off into this area, and some people that were hoping to one day or thinking about one day maybe being on the board came into this area to get to know us. So there's lots and lots of ways to do that, but the issue is the board and the board's mandate has to move forward and cannot stop because of a single voice or a couple of voices in the room. And it's important, none of us that I know of, I myself don't have unlimited financial resources, and that darn old 24 hours in a day that I keep trying to squeeze one more hour, I'm still not capable of doing that. I love the board work I do in my community, and when someone asks me to be on their board, the thing I know is I can't give them something I don't have. So it is really appropriate. I've used the word contract here probably more specifically, more accurately to say an agreement, but there should be a written agreement. It's a simple one-page document if you don't already have such an agreement today. And if you do, maybe there's a way that we could have different people share at some point what agreements that they might share with others. Ours is quite simple. It's a one-page document. It has our logo at the top. It has our values and our mission. And it says, in support of this mission, annually, I agree to do the following. And it lists 5 things. The thing that I ask about an agreement is that I've been handed many board member job descriptions that went on for 2.5 pages, or that even were just 1 page, but they were not measurable. And the thing I have to know is I only have X amount of time beyond my job here and my family, my friends. So I know what available time I have, but I need to know what you're asking from me, and can I do that? And so the thing that when I'm working with an organization, whatever goes onto that agreement, it has to be finite, it has to be measurable, so that I know you have how many board meetings, you want me to come to board meetings? How many are they? Put the dates right there. If you know when those dates are, if it's the first Monday, the first Wednesday, put that there. If you want me to buy season tickets, if it's performing arts and you want me to buy season tickets, or if it's something around the visual art world and there's some level, whatever happens there. So whatever it is you want me to do in that regard. Here we would ask someone to come to our board meetings. We would ask someone to purchase tickets and be with our artists. We would ask someone to find a way to share their brain trust with us. And by that, I mean that they would serve on a task force, they would serve on a committee in some regard. We've got to figure out some way, because we're bringing people on to our board that we're learning from. So how do I capture that information? Then we ask them to make a gift, and we put right there a minimum gift of X. If it's $100, a minimum gift of $100, you write it down. And we ask for a minimum gift of $100 or whatever that number might be. And then the last thing we ask them to do, and we'll talk more and I'll move quickly, we ask them to do the role of cultivation within within the world of fundraising. We ask them to do the cultivation and the stewardship. So we want to always be assessing and the current makeup in the board structure. And the issue with that is that you want to know who you have, and because we now have this strategic plan, you want to know who you need. So it's very easy to figure out, if you know that you're going to be involved in a certain topic for the next 3 years, who are the people in your community that know the most about that? And I know that many times I have gone and gotten 5 or 6 or 7 people that knew a topic I knew nothing about, and then we bring them on the board and we learn from them. So you want to be looking at that current structure that you have. You want to balance as many men as women. You want to look at what you need to support your strategic plan, and make sure that if you have a nominating committee and you're the professional, either the fundraising professional or the CEO, the ED, that you're on that committee, because that's the most important committee. It's in charge of the future. Now this slide's kind of funny in a way. It's a long setup, long wind up, and I'll do this for you quickly. A colleague of mine from the Pacific Northwest, one of the largest belly companies in the United States, with many of his board members on Microsoft, came up with this whole digital system. And I would suggest to you that right now you could turn around on your notepad and you could do this for your board right now. You don't need this digital system, and that's why I show this slide. So ultimately, this is a 2x2 logic model. So if you go up the vertical, so low value at the bottom left corner and highest value at the top, and then going along on the horizontal. So you're talking about ease of retention. So the lowest maintenance person is at the 100, and the high maintenance person is back at that 0, 1, 2, 3. So ultimately, this is a slide that we show our board members when they're coming. It's something of a joke when we show that to them. We make a joke of it. But the bottom line is that the people in the bottom left quadrant are people that are high maintenance for you and your staff and low value. They are likely not to give when they said they're going to give. They don't pay out their pledge. They always make an excuse, and you find yourself spending an inordinate amount of time with them. And so what I say to our board and I say to you is they need to go. They simply need to go, because the conversation that I have with my board is these are the people that suck the life and the joy out of a team and a staff that loves being here and makes their work hard. And when their work is hard and it stresses my ability to retain wonderful people, that is the worst thing that happens to this organization. I need to have happy employees. We will serve any board member in any way. And so the joke that we say is you can be as high maintenance as you want so long as you're high value. And they get it. They actually get it. In fact, bless their hearts, a couple of times some of them have asked a pretty simple request and have asked, am I falling into the bottom left quadrant, which is a little bit of a joke here. But I mention it because it's not a joke. We work hard, and most of us hire people that are in the field of service. We hire servant leaders here. We care about our people. We care about the relationships. We care about them being happy. And people who make a career of not being happy and not being generous are ones we have to think about not having with us. You could literally draw this off and put your board there right now. And I think it's something to think about because I think that over the course of time, it does make a difference of how are we in good relationships and healthy relationships with our board, or do we find ourselves, do we find certain members of the board sucking up all the time and all the energy? So I think before I'll say for a moment about the right stuff, I think an important thing is to think about terms and term limits. Terms are really important, and term limits, I'm not a believer. I think a lot of times people have term limits because they are afraid that you're going to have a bad board member and you're never going to get rid of them. And the reality is that the opposite happens, is that it kicks off a lot of great people. So I think having a term, in our case it's 3 years, and it is a hard stop. There's no roll through the stop sign on that. So they have to stop, the nominating committee meets, they review their record of their agreement that they made with us, and then there is a formal situation where the staff says to the nominating committee, we recommend the following board members come forward and to be asked to become members again, and they agree or disagree, and then they go and they ask that person in person. There's no, hey, do you want to re-up phone call? It's a hard stop because we get really good feedback sometimes of things that we could be doing better. It's a great conversation, but those terms, when we get to the end, and we seldom have anyone, but this year we had 2 people, they got a wonderful letter thanking them for their service. Their term has ended, and we hope they have a great life. But there is absolutely a way to end these relationships. To be willing to wait for the right stuff is really important, because when you go and you have a conversation with someone, you've identified you need an attorney, or you've identified you need a CPA, or you've identified you need an educator on your board, and you go and you sit down. And that person, if they're smart, is going to say to you, well, I'm really busy. And my suggestion to you all is to say, well, that's great news. In fact, I'm thrilled to hear that you're busy, because we only ask busy people to come onto our board. So that's great. Because, I mean, let's face it, who owns busy? We're all busy. So I think what my tendency is to do to say, then how might we queue up? If this is not the right year, may we continue this conversation with you next year? We'd like you to get to know us better, but we're really serious. We would love to have you consider coming on our board. That conversation has been more successful than you might realize. So be willing to wait for the right stuff. When I say practice what you preach, it is important that our boards give, and it is a different relationship. I've been fundraising a long time, and it's an interesting thing, and many of you may have been as well. But what happens when you work in the field of philanthropy? It is a different relationship if I am your fundraiser, when I separate you from your money. That is a different relationship than when I separate you from your time. And so it is important, because in some ways that money is our time. You know, Thoreau says time is money, money is time, and we take a portion of our time and we sell that. I mean, each of us have a different hourly time for which we are compensated, and then with that we pay our bills, and with whatever is left over, we hope that, I guess, we pay our taxes, and then some of us, you know, also engage in philanthropy. So we really are, when they give us a gift, they really are giving us a piece of their time, a piece of their life, which is how I've come to think about gifts, as gifts of time that have been converted to money. And they don't get the time back. And so we should never be cavalier with those gifts, of course, but it is important that those gifts be made, and 100% of the board. And it's a moment here is that there can be no zero option. We all have $1. We all have $1. There can be no zero option. There will be times that life happens, and even if you have a minimum, many will say a gift that is significant to you or meaningful to you, some will set a limit. And even if a board member has to hit a limit, it has to hit below that limit because of something going on in their lives, and it happens in almost every year. There's been a change of job, a change of marriage, a change of health. Things happen, and these are people in our lives. It is my response when someone calls and says, I've had this situation, I'm not going to be able to make my board gift this year. My response is, first of all, we care about you. How can we help you? How can we be there with you? The second response is, what I ask you to do is to make the gift this year that you can make, whatever that might be, and we will never discuss it again. At the point that your life allows you to regain your giving level, then you will do so, and that will signal to me that these are better times. And I think that it is, we have to know that we are going to take good care of these people's money as they make these gifts, and that these gifts are in fact important. They're literally, most often the gift that comes is many times what I would have thought would have happened. The only option that can't happen is a zero option. And so the practice what you preach says we must also give. We can't ask our organizations to do what we won't do. Our board members can't ask everyone else to give unless they give. We, as staff, cannot fail to support our organization. Again, we all have a dollar. And we do run a campaign within our organization with our artists, with our staff, and it's at all different levels. Some do it on just on payroll deduction, but I think it's really important that we support as well. Be careful what you wish for is that in many communities there is an organization and everyone's a bit admiring of that particular board, and the thing I can say about a board that has splendiferous people on it is that they are also they can be unforgiving. In our situation now, every email should be answered probably within 12 hours, but 24 hours I'm getting something back saying your staff is not responding. We each need to stay in the chapter of our lives where we are and move forward, but hopping beyond and getting a board that is a giving board and a high-level board comes with also a need to have a staff that supports a lot of their efforts. So it is a little bit of a be careful what you wish for, and to not forget the ones that brought you there, because that is really in many cases the people that loved you in the beginning, the people in this organization that pounded down the boards and sewed the costumes. Many of them are still with us, and we never want to forget how we came into this world and who really got us there. We are going to be short on time. I can see. I want to go quickly into a few of the fundraising basics just to get us started, and then maybe I'll provide an opportunity in the future to keep this going. I want to share with you the fact that in terms of the language of fundraising, prospects and donors are not the same words, and I want to make clear to everyone that they are not interchangeable. A prospect is an individual or a corporation or a foundation that's never given to your organization before. A donor has given. So where is the source of the money? Where does the money come from? And to me, I organize it into 4 different groups: individuals, corporations, foundations, and government. But I will say to you that foundations in many ways are really individuals and corporations that have a lot of resources and too many people asking. And so they set up rules, and they set up a third party, and they set up sort of a wall and a process. So really foundations are only the monies of individuals and corporations that are redirected, and a very long process to get there. The 80-20 rule, there's so many 80-20 rules, but this one's really important. And that is that we spend a lot of time writing all kinds of grants and doing all kinds of things. But the fact of the matter is that more than 80% of all wealth in the United States is in the hands of individuals. And yet our boards say, and sometimes our staff say, I'll do anything, but don't make me ask my friend for money. And at the end of the day, it's the most important thing that we can do. And that is knowing that we're well enough organized, knowing that we know what we're doing, knowing that we are going to be great stewards of that money. But individuals are the fastest way to grow your fundraising, and it's the one thing we have a tendency to avoid. In terms of the structural elements, there's lots of ways to have a well-positioned but diverse sources of revenue coming even from the contributed world for a nonprofit. The grassroots, which would be your lower gifts that maybe can be done almost all digitally at this point. A membership level to me is a point at which someone's making a gift and you're giving them something back. Some of us in the performing arts, maybe they give a gift and they get to come to get a drink at intermission, or they get a refrigerator magnet back. Whatever it is that you're sending back because now, and you're beginning to incent them up, I consider that the membership level, then up to the major gift level. And then planned gifts and endowment, which people will say, well, that's 50 years from now. No, I would make the case that these are all different ways that people give. And the people that give planned gifts and endowments or gift to capital campaigns, they don't give these other ways. So if you are able to, over time, open up each of these buckets at some level, you will not find that one kind of a donor goes necessarily through these buckets. You may get funds you would never have had otherwise. In terms of how you get to a relationship with corporations, not always this case, but often it will be you can get a board member to join your board or get them interested in maybe a special project, or even get a company, a locally owned business, and their employees interested in a special project and volunteering with your organization. And then from that, an annual sponsorship will grow. In terms of foundations, this one gets to be kind of interesting because not all foundations will allow you to approach them. Sometimes they have to approach you. And when I was a very frustrated fundraiser with a lot of money left to get, and it was a Friday afternoon, and my week had not gone well, and I'd had too many no's that week, and I thought, I have nothing to lose. So I just, in all frustration, called a New York foundation that I admired, and this poor person that answered the phone, I said, I know that you don't take solicitations from people, but I'm just sitting here, it's Friday afternoon. My organization's wonderful, but you don't know us. So how are you ever going to ask us to apply when you don't even know us? She actually started laughing. She said, I bet half of America would like to ask that question. And she said, I'm kind of shocked that you have the nerve to do this. I said, hey, it's Friday afternoon and I've not had a good week. But ultimately what she said was she explained the process. And in that particular time, there were folders that were kept. And if you sent them something, they had to put it in the folder. And so when they went to make the invitations were made by the folders. So, sometimes we just have to break through those barriers and just ask for our organizations. In terms of government, our governments are really do, I think, a pretty phenomenal job in terms of a need has to exist for our community, or whether it be our municipality, our state, or the federal community. Public funding gets allocated. There's a competitive process that we all go through. And then advocacy to defend that source of funding, the way that I would say through Texans for the Arts, that we care deeply about what happens to our TCA and what happens to our NEA. So we're in this relationship together, but it is a long process, but it's an important one for all of us. So once we have these donors, how do we hang on to them? And the secret to the success is stewardship. I do want to get through this before we get to questions, and I know questions are coming up here quickly. The stewardship process, on either side of the ask, we have the process of cultivation on one side, which is a process of inviting people and keeping up with them and getting to know them. On the other side, it's thanking them. So by our fundraising standards, we need to thank someone 5 to 7 times before we ever ask for their money again, and that's not thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So how do we do all this? And the process is called moves management. And moves management says we are tracking everything. We are tracking that when we invite people to come. So it's simply you open up an Excel spreadsheet. You've got a group of people and they're giving you $100 and you want to move them to $200 or $150. So over the course of your season, whatever your time is, you would say, we're going to invite them to a residency in a school. And then you've got a column that says, did they come or not? And we're going to invite them to come to sit in on a rehearsal or to come to an arts installation. And then the opening, did they come or not? So pretty soon you can track. When you get to 3 or 4 or 5 positive responses, you've got an interested person. Ask them to become more involved through a gift. If you've always have to wash their hair, they're never coming, they're not that into you. They're not that into me. I can take them off because I've asked and asked and asked, and they're just politely finding their way of telling us no. And this is how we spend time on the people that are interested and how we don't waste time, but we have to track. I get a conversation a lot about, well, that's really fun and good because large organizations have Blackbaud and they've got Tessitura or they've got Pacquiao, and we can't afford that. So the thing that I say to you is that it is about the process of being a knowledge worker. It's about the discipline of keeping data clean. We've all heard garbage in, garbage out. So if I don't have Pacquiao and I don't have Blackbaud, what do I have? And most of us have Outlook. So I just want to show, I've shown a lot of organizations that most of us have at our fingertips a relational database. It's just the discipline of knowing how to use it. So for those with very involved database systems, please forgive me for just a minute, but for those on the phone who don't have that, I want to share with you, it's simply going to Outlook now. It used to say contacts, but now it's, you go in and you click people. And here's me. If you need to get to hold me, here's me. So here's my record. Now, as you go to the next screen, if you look at the top, is the thing that says categorize. So when you push that, you get this drop down, and you can see I've got a bunch of things on my categorize here. And then you see the second red circle, which is rename. So now you go in and you rename the categories to fit whatever you have. If you have a grassroots, if you have a certain gala or a certain fundraiser or a golf tournament or whatever, you would want to make that a category. If you get money from the government, if you have major gifts, however it is that you have your line items in your budget assigned, the ways that you're bringing in the money, that is probably how you would want to rename these categories. And so then, of course, on my particular record, you go in and you start clicking boxes. And so ultimately what you end up with is the following. You've got a record for Cookie Ruiz, who you're coming after for, she's a prospect for corporate. She's currently a major gift donor, and she's a board member. So you now have a relational database. Now, I just made this up for you all, so I then went in and I searched the next slide. I need to see all of the records that I have that are prospects for corporate, so I can send them an email right there. So there I am. So this is just a very simple tool, but whether it is Blackbaud or whether it is inside of this system, the discipline is that every time you talk to someone, you're going in and you're making a record. I'm going to back up for a second. And so there's a notes field here behind this little thing. So where it says notes, in that field, anytime you have an interface with this record, I would put my initials in, I would put the date, colon, and then I would write what happened. Because none of us can remember all of these things. We can't remember every time someone mentions the name of their grandchildren or their anniversary or all of these pieces of anecdotal information that builds these relationships. Really, we need this scientific support, this digital support for what we're doing if we can have that. This could be done on a card file. It could be done anywhere. It's the discipline of taking in the information and storing it. I think for today we'll end here, and I will see if there are any questions.
All right, let's see here. Thank you so much, Cookie. Hold on just a second here. We'll get this other screen up. So one of the questions we have here is that, hold on just a second. There we are. All right, there we go. Somebody was mentioning how important the need for a strategic plan is. So looks like they're in the process of growing up, and several years ago they hired a consultant who said that they weren't ready for a strategic plan. When is an organization ready for a strategic plan, and how long should the process take?
Wow. Well, I imagine there are as many opinions as there are consultants. So I would disagree with that. And I think that at any point you are ready to make a transition at all with your company, with your organization, first of all, the plan should be in place. It should not be a multi-page thing that sits on a shelf. It can be, honestly, the plans that I've helped build for people were 1 or 2 page documents that were very concise. It's getting concise that matters. And then also getting it to be measurable. And ultimately, when you have a very concise plan like that, then you never come out of strategic planning. All you do is you begin to reach out. You're always sort of each year kind of looking out another year, so you're always looking with about a 3-year window. Some organizations are old enough and have the financial facility to look out in 5-year windows. But it is far less complex than people think, because it is really finding 2 or 3 things. Usually I work with groups getting 3 goals, a couple of priorities around each of those goals, and metrics to support them. And that's a plan, because that's enough to tell you when you are off of plan, when you are outside of the scope. And most of our organizations don't have the resources to do many things beyond that well. And excellence is the goal here.
Great. Also, they were wondering if you don't hire a consultant, who can lead the process?
In a perfect world, I'm a big fan of bringing people with that kind of talent onto your board and asking for a gift of their time. You certainly can hire consultants, and a lot of people do that really well. But in terms of the nonprofit organizations I work with, most of them would have not had those resources. So what I often will do is try to help them identify someone who would really like to come on board and help them do that. I do think that there are grants, and there are some great planning efforts I've seen. I don't want to denigrate consulting relationships in any way at all. It's just that a lot of the organizations that I work with, they need to plan whether or not those resources are there. And so that's where if the resources are not there, I do recommend trying to identify someone in the community that has that facility that would come in and work with your organization. And you'd be surprised when you ask someone to do what they do best. They may not know all the ins and outs of your art form, but if they do planning, they might be really happy to come and do that for you. I know that's how I've been invited into most organizations.
Great. We're in a small town. How do we find board members who can raise money?
That one I don't want to ignore, because there's a lot of fear around fundraising, and I know that. And I have lived twice in Del Rio, and I lived for years in Wichita Falls as well. So I've lived in different size cities across our state, and I recognize that. And I think that one of the most important things is to remove the fear of fundraising, and this whole idea of I'm going to ask my friend for money and I'm going to be embarrassed by it. So I think that it is at some level 2 things. One, there are people in your community that are just more comfortable with this, but everybody's going after those people. So I've had the experience of having to take the wonderful people in front of me who did not necessarily fall into that category and change how they felt about fundraising. And ultimately, we've got to get this idea that we're begging out of it. We're not begging. Our organizations deserve these funds. We're not heading off to the Bahamas with this money. We're helping people, and we're improving our community. And I think when we can get that comfort with that, it helps change the conversation. Now, that said, the makeup of who holds the money and where the money is held is different in our communities. And there are some communities that I've worked with where it really is imperative that there are grants written, and foundation money really is a great source. So you will know your community best, but at all points I would suggest getting more comfortable with fundraising is a big goal here.
Great. Well, I think that's about all the time we have today, Cookie. Can we have you back again sometime?
I would love that. I would love to come back. I've learned so much from other friends and happy to share.
That's great. Well, after the close of this webinar, you'll be asked a few questions, brief questions to help us keep improving these professional development webinars. Please join us again in 2 months when our professional development webinar series continues with Vicki Meek, who will be presenting on becoming a community-based artist. In the meantime, if you have recommendations for topics and or speakers, please be sure to email me at derek@arts.texas.gov. And also, if you have any additional questions, I'll be sure to pass those on to Cookie. This webinar will be archived on Vimeo, and a PDF of the slide presentation will be sent to you and is also available upon request. I'd like to give special thanks to our IT team, Laura Wiegand, our Director of Programs and Technology, and Freddie Martinez, our Systems Administrator. And I'd also like to thank Lital Jacob for her help as well. And most of all, thank you, Cookie, for being here today.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.